Four Hulos on Gray Velvet. This is Playtime. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Jackie. Welcome back to Seen and Heard.
Happy 2025.
Happy 2025. This is the podcast all about the Sight and Sound greatest films of all time list. And we're here with a special guest. We're here with Jackson Cooper, who is the executive director at AGFA. If you don't know AGFA, you should, the American Genre Film Archive. He's also an author, programmer, fundraiser. He's contributed liner notes on Arrow video releases, and he's taught classes on musicals, film, and pop culture for Duke University, North Carolina State University, and the University of Washington. Jackson.
Hi, Jackson.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, guys. It's great to be here. Big fan.
Well, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you on. We're so happy to have a scholar such as yourself on the show. I think Greg and I were actually talking before we started of just, and I'm really curious, and I'm sure our listeners are really curious too, is how does one become you? Like, how does one become like a film scholar?
A scholar is a very I appreciate that term, but I consider myself it sounds even more pretentious, a film historian, perhaps. But really it came from, gosh, a lot of just sitting in a dark room, watching a lot of movies, and then just reading like Pauline Kael and Roger Ebert's the great movies, reading Sight and Sound, Cahiers de Cinema, and things like that. And just trying to figure out like why people liked movies. And so that just led me to reading about film history. And I actually really avoided film theory for a long time when I was growing up because it got in the way of appreciating movies. And so when I write and when I teach, it's always from a place of like, here's why. Here's some things of why you should like it. Like I really was inspired early on by Roger Ebert and the Great Movies books, because he would say like, here's why this movie is good. And to say that in a way that's not in an academic tone is actually very hard, because you have to talk about history and aesthetics and tone and character. And that sort of shaped me in my writing and it just sort of in my programming as well, where it's like you have to tell people why they should care about this, and also like what to look for. I learned that a lot from programming at Alamo Drafthouse and running the program at North Carolina Museum of Art, where it's like you have to bring audiences along for it. But I appreciate the scholar comment, and also I love just telling people about cool movies, because there's just so many great movies like this one out there.
Of course.
I'm a huge physical media person. If I turned this computer around, you would just see like a wall of Blu-rays. But for those, and I'm such a huge fan of AGFA, but for those who don't know AGFA.
Yeah, AGFA stands for the American Genre Film Archive. It's the world's largest archive and film distributor dedicated to genre cinema, so horror, exploitation, kung fu, blaxploitation, things like that. So we're also we're the largest nonprofit archive and distributor to genre film. So we're very unique because we don't just run on, Blu-ray sales and theatrical rights, licensing fees and such. We also are viewer and listener supported, like through donations and grant funding and sponsorships. So it's really mission driven versus a lot of other labels, which like to put out titles and restore them, and that's great. I mean, ours are very curated to underrepresented filmmakers who used horror and genre. So queer people, trans people, BIPOC filmmakers. And what we do is we restore those films, we put them out on Blu-ray, we put them out in theaters to really promote those stories and to promote those filmmakers especially. So, in a sense, we're kind of rewriting film history from outsider art and this sort of marginalized groups point of view. So AGFA's, it's a pretty incredible company, but we do have a Blu-ray label distributed through Vinegar Syndrome. We do have an archive of 6,000 35 millimeter and 60 millimeter prints in Austin, Texas.
Wow.
And, we do also have theatrical distribution rights for a lot of films that are partner labels like Arrow, Severin, Vinegar Syndrome. They put out on Blu-ray, and then we get the theatrical rights, and we work with theaters, everything from a 50-seat micro cinema to, a film festival in Europe to show, Donnie Darko, for instance, or Phantasm. We work to book those out and to bring them to repertory audiences. So it's a really full scale, full cycle organization, and it's been going strong. We celebrate 15 years this year in
Wow.
2024, so it's pretty incredible. Yeah.
That's great. I'm such a huge fan
Awesome.
of what you guys do. One of my honestly favorite things that I have on my shelf is the AGFA 3-volume Doris Wishman sets.
Yes, we are so proud of that. Yes, the filmmaker box sets. We're very proud of everything we put out, and one of the great things is because we're so mission driven. It's not about making money. It's about what stories we want to put out, who do we want people to know about, and Doris Wishman is just something that will always live on because she's just so important to everyone's lives. But yeah, those restorations are unbelievable, and the box sets, the way they magnetize together, even
Yeah, they
are
stick
just, like,
together.
so great. Yeah, yeah, we're sort of an alternative Criterion collection because we get I'm glad you like those. I'm glad those are very prized possessions to you. Yeah.
Yeah, they're awesome. And I knew so little about her going into them, but when the first volume was announced, I was like, oh yeah, I've heard her name, but I couldn't tell you anything, so I just kind of bought it for exploration's sake, and I loved the movies, and I got all 3 of them.
Yeah, there's some special about Nude on the Moon and Bad Girls Go to Hell. Like, I mean, those are pretty incredible movies that again, if you've only heard the names of the titles, and why wouldn't you? Those are great titles. And then you watch them and you hear about Doris's past, and you see her on Conan, which you can on YouTube, talking about her dog. It's just like you put it all together and you're just like, oh my God, this is so great. So yeah, we're very, 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 very proud of those box sets.
Very cool.
Well, speaking of exploration, what have you guys been watching, both of you?
I can start. I mean, it was just Christmas, so every Christmas I do a Barbara Stanwyck Christmas.
Ooh,
And I do a double header of Christmas in Connecticut and Remember the Night.
Remember the Night. Nice.
So good. I love
So
Remember.
good.
It's so good. And I love telling people it is it's a template for Hallmark movies, pretty
Mhm.
much. Like pretty much Hallmark movies. It's almost beat for beat. And then new things that have come out. I just watched. I try my best to keep up with modern horror, but we have such a backlog of movies in our archive that we're planning to restore that I have to watch all the time. But I really enjoyed a movie called Oddity, which was really, really fabulous and refreshing. And I'm seeing Nora tonight. I'm so excited. What about you guys? What are you watching?
Honestly, I haven't seen much again. It was Christmas and I've just been really busy and I was traveling. While I was traveling, I actually saw To Be or Not to Be at Le Champeau in Paris,
Oh
which
my
was really fun. It's a movie I love, but it was the only time it was playing was noon, and like everything else the week that I was there was in French or Italian, so like there wouldn't be subtitles that I would understand. So I had to see an English language movie, and the only one that lined up was To Be or Not to Be, and it was
God.
at noon, like a few days after we got there, and it was great. It
Mhm.
was lovely, and actually, Le Champeau is dedicated to Jacques Tati, so it's
There you go.
yeah, it was really
Fabulous.
great. So I saw that, and then I did see The Brutalist the day after Christmas, which was I thought it was wonderful. And honestly, it's really interesting because it's not based on a true story, by the way. While I was watching it, I was like I fully convinced that this was a real person, but apparently
Yeah.
it wasn't. This great big beautiful VistaVision epic that only cost $6 million. Did you guys know about this? That the
No, I didn't
budget
know
was
any of
that small? I
Wow.
had no clue, and honestly just really reassuring that like they were able to achieve that much.
Mhm.
So yeah, I thought it was pretty great.
Amazing.
Cool. Mine is pretty boring. Although yeah, because work has been, lighter with the holidays. So I've been trying to catch up on a backlog, and I did kind of a noir dive, starting with Ride the Pink Horse, which I
Oh,
really
great,
loved. So
great,
good.
great
And then
film.
I went from that into Mildred Pierce, which I had never seen, and then I went into Sam Fuller's Pickup on South Street. And then
Fabulous.
I went into Drive a Crooked Road with Mickey
Wow.
Rooney, which is
Fabulous.
incredible. And then I kind of ended, not knowing this was like a Christmas movie. I ended with Cash on Demand, the Hammer movie with Peter
Yeah,
Cushing. Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah.
It's a Christmas Carol.
It is. It is. Yeah. Rarely shown, rarely screened, but a really, really good film.
It
Yeah.
was, yeah, it was, I was, it's Hammer, and it's not, they had that whole, like, they're known for their gothic horror movies, but then they also did these kind of stark black and white crime dramas
Yeah.
too. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
there's one from the early 60s. There's one with Betty Davis that's really, really fabulous. But yeah, everyone doesn't talk about those noir ones. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't talk about, they need more love, but I was really impressed. It was fantastic. Yeah, Nosferatu, which I don't want to be super negative. I wasn't a huge fan, but I liked Robert Eggers' first two films so much. I mean, The Witch and The Lighthouse, I thought were signaling something really great, and The Northman definitely left me cold. And this movie too. I just think it's not that I didn't like Nosferatu, it's more just like it's another adaptation of Dracula, and the story has been adapted hundreds of times, and I just felt he played it too safe. Like, I was never surprised. I was waiting for him to do something interesting with it and do something different with it. And instead, it was just like Nosferatu again. And I feel like, as far as Nosferatu is concerned, like the Herzog one is so great that it's like, if you're going to bring another Nosferatu to the table, like, you better be prepared to outdo Herzog. Otherwise, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah.
But
I'm seeing it today, actually. So,
Oh, great. Oh, okay.
yeah.
Good. Yeah.
But I recently watched the Herzog one, and it's so, so, so good.
Yeah, I rewatched it over Halloween, and I mean it just doesn't get any better than that. I mean,
Yeah.
truly, I mean that Coppola's too. It's just like it just the Herzog is it to
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
yeah. Well, should we get into this week's film?
Let's do
Speaking
it.
of great directors who are
Speaking
going
of.
gonzo,
Exactly. Who are
Yes.
going
Yeah.
so big. From 1967, this is Jacques Tati's Playtime.
Playtime was released in 1967. It was directed by Jacques Tati, co-written by Tati, Jacques Lagrange, and Art Buchwald. Music by Francis Lamarck and cinematography by Jean Badal and Andreas Winding. Playtime finds Monsieur Hulot in an ultra-modern, industrial, and consumer-driven Paris with little resemblance to the historic beauty it once was. A group of American tourists, including a young woman named Barbara, arrive at Orly Airport. Barbara is longing to find the Paris she has heard so much about, but finds the landmarks hidden behind steel skyscrapers. The only hint she finds of real Parisian life is a flower seller, whom she can't even take a picture of because of the tour's grueling schedule. Hulot crosses paths with the tour group after a business meeting that never ends up happening leads him to a trade show resembling the office he just left. He bumbles through cases of mistaken identity and even meets a few army friends on the street. One of them invites him to his ultra-modern and sparsely decorated apartment for a drink. Another one is a doorman at a new nightclub, Royal Garden. A series of disasters ensue at the club's opening night as the unprepared staff try to deal with drunk patrons, no air conditioning, a dance floor coming apart, and annoying iron chairs. Hulot's doorman friend insists he come inside, where he meets Barbara. The two dance and close out the club with a group led by a drunk American businessman, Mr. Schultz. At a huge supermarket the next morning, Hulot buys Barbara a scarf with different Parisian landmarks on it as her bus takes off in a carousel of traffic back to the airport. The film stars Jacques Tati as Monsieur Hulot, Barbara Denick as Barbara, and Michael Kearns as Mr. Schultz. The character of Monsieur Hulot first appeared in 1953 with Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, followed by Mon Oncle in 1958. After Playtime, his last appearance would be in Traffic in 1971. When Tati first started planning Playtime, he thought he could find mid-century buildings to shoot, but quickly found it would be impossible to use the actual Orly airport, and decided to build his own little city on a studio lot, which he called Tativille. The facades were on wheels, it was all made to scale, and they pulled a few tricks to actually save some money. So they took pictures of the actual steel walls at Orly Airport, blew them up on paper, and pasted them on the walls of the fake airport. So it looked like steel, but it saved money, and there was also no reflection in the camera, so it was really great. There are cardboard cutouts of people where extras should be in like the big building, some of the big building facades and the cubicle scene. Some of those guys are cutouts. But still, Tativille was extremely costly, and Jacques Tati was extremely detail-oriented and a perfectionist. So what was supposed to be a 170-day shoot turned into a production taking place over 365 working days, lasting nearly 3 years. And apparently 1,000 people worked on the film. Budget crises and weather delays made it such a long process. All of his loans and government financiers weren't enough. Jacques Tati had to sign away the rights to his previous films to keep the production going. Started out as a 2.5 million euro budget, ended up being 15.4 million euros. And it was the most expensive film ever made in France when it was released. It was shot on 70 millimeter film, which was rare for non-epics. And after kind of a lukewarm reception and bad box office numbers, he had to file for bankruptcy and sell his family home. Some believe that it was commercially unsuccessful because the character of Monsieur Hulot doesn't appear in the film that much. Jacques Tati had grown tired of Hulot's character, but he knew for commercial success he needed to be in the film. But yeah, he wanted to move away from the character. That's why he kind of appears in background, disappears for a long time, comes back. And it never really had a full US distribution. Even though Mon Oncle won Best Foreign Film at the Oscars, the US distribution kind of fell through. And for any showings in the US, it was converted to 35 millimeter and edited down to 103 minutes. But the reviews were good. Still, people weren't really showing up. There were complaints from the start about the length of the film. It led Tati to cut the film to 120 minutes from the original 140. He assured the film community that the full-length negative existed, like he had it, but the longest cut ever released is 124 minutes. And so no one really knows what happened to that 140-minute cut. There were plans to turn the set, Tativille, into a film school after the production. There was interest from foreign productions to use it. However, it was destroyed in 1967, and as it was being destroyed, Jacques Tati threw a copy of Playtime, like a print, on a wall as it was coming down, and you can watch that in a clip on the Criterion channel.
I think it was the script or something.
Was it the script or it's you can't even tell from the video, but he's throwing something. I can't tell if it's a print or the script. But he remained convinced that it was all worth it. He used to say Playtime will always be his last film, even though it wasn't technically. The dialogue, like a lot of Tati films, is purposefully turned down. It mixes English, German, and French. And apparently, the film is famous for its grayscale color scheme, but apparently there's one red item in every shot. And after I read that, I kind of went back and watched a little bit. I can see it. I can see things that can pass as red for sure. So, yeah, those are my specs.
Nice.
I know. It's been like they're amazing. It's just like the story of the making of this film is incredible and just kind of sad.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And it's yeah, it was his white whale. It was what he wanted to do. I mean, and yeah, I love directors that go big.
Right. And of course the elephant in the room is kind of Coppola, right?
Right.
So recently, Coppola, like just last week, I feel like I saw his Criterion Closet video where he pulls out Playtime and he explains his affinity for the film because of his, like, just how he identifies with Tati and just putting everything he has into a movie that's kind of misunderstood upon release, but is, like you said, the white whale. And
Yeah, and Heaven's Gate is
yes, oh
critical as
my God.
well. And then even like, Terrence Malick's The New World, just
Mm,
all these directors who do these passion projects and then they, yeah, just get misunderstood, but then find new life later. I just listed two other Criterion releases
right,
that
right.
because they were on Criterion created that. But I know Playtime over time gained a lot of respect, especially among film critics and scholars who, analyzed it as a really pivotal film for French cinema. Yeah.
The
Definitely.
making of it almost reminds me of Synecdoche, New York or something.
Yeah,
Yes,
very right.
yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I
Well,
was just, yeah,
and
I was like,
another
they should make a
another
movie.
another misunderstood film where, with budget crises and it looked like thousands of people worked on it. Yeah, that's a really
Yeah.
good comparison. Yeah.
Well, let's do initial thoughts. Jackson, do you want to kick us off with your personal history with Playtime and why you picked it? And yeah, I'm excited to hear it.
I freaking love this movie. I've loved it ever since I was a kid and I watched it as a kid because I grew up in the Netflix DVD age. There were still blockbusters and such, and I was on the board of a film society in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the president of the board was like, you should watch some Jacques Tati. Like I was a kid, I was like 16. I was like, okay. And so I watched Mon Oncle and then I watched Playtime. I didn't see Monsieur Hulot's Holiday till like later, weirdly enough. And but Mon Oncle just blew my mind how funny it was because for some reason as a young kid you're like comedy doesn't exist, before you were born pretty much, right? So you're
Yeah.
watching, these old films and you're just like, oh my God, comedy is forever. But I just remember like seeing slapstick done so well in the Tati films. It was just, and it wasn't, like it was Marx Brothers, it was Three Stooges, but it was something a little more sophisticated. It wasn't as mean, right? Like everyone's so nice in these French
Yeah.
films. It does have an edge of cynicism to it, which we can get into. But I just remember Playtime blew my mind because of it didn't feel so episodic. It felt like one full movie where there was constantly funny things. And I just remember even when I was young being so overwhelmed that it wasn't like those comedies that I would watch in the movie theaters where it's like, and now a funny thing is happening, and then we have a serious scene and
Hmm.
funny. Like, everything about Playtime was funny. And it was epic because there were so many people on screen. And I just
Yeah.
remember as a kid being like, wow, like the sets were big, the cast was big, the bits just went on and on. I mean, that restaurant scene is probably one of the funniest scenes choreographed in a film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I keep going back to it. I'm just always drawn by it. I mean, the story, of course, you want to see big production values, right? But also just I just keep going back with how well choreographed it all is. It's
Hmm.
just like you just can analyze every single scene in that is so well constructed. I go back fascinated every single time I watch it. I mean, Mon Oncle and Monsieur Hulot are definitely the more overtly comedic, but there's something very serious about the comedy in Playtime, which is why I love it so much. And I had the old Criterion DVD with the splattered paint cover on it. So it's yeah, I cherish. I love this movie so much. Yeah.
I love that.
I love that too. And I love how you were part of a film society when you were 16.
Well, no, I'll tell you how I got on the board was I was a kid who was on Facebook and no one on the board really knew how to use Facebook. So they were like, come and do this.
That is
And
hilarious.
but I got to buy I had great people who were just like, yeah, okay, great. Well, if you like films, like just come and do this. And so I just got to skim through the Kino and Park Circus catalogs and that was also right before the transition to digital. So getting 35s was getting harder and harder and harder to do. So yeah, but we wanted to show Mon Oncle, and yeah, the president of the board was like, "Oh, you should watch his stuff." And I was like, "Okay." So I rented Mon Oncle, loved it, and then the algorithm, if you like this, you'll like this. Playtime was next, and so I got that, and it was yeah, my life was changed.
And Netflix DVD had all those, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Blockbuster DVD too had all of them.
Blockbuster.
Yeah. I also love that it's 120 minutes because you don't get a long comedy anymore, like a
Yeah.
budget long comedy. And I was so used to like, Wedding Crashers and 40-Year-Old Virgin and like those films that are just like very sparse, like elongated SNL skits,
Hmm.
Hot Rod and those films. So to sit down and watch like a 2 hour sustained comedy was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Like from a film appreciation point of view, it was just
Yeah.
like, how's he gonna do it? Like, and it's just pure comedy. Like there's
Yeah.
pure comedy. There's none of this like, oh, and our hero meets a girl and all this
Yeah.
wrong. Like it is just slapstick galore. And I want to see I know it doesn't exist, but I wish the 140-minute cut exists because that just more
Yeah.
playtime. Yeah.
I know people would lose it. I think if they unearthed that, it would be a huge deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
So
stories like that too, where it's like there's one print left
one
somewhere in
print
a
left. Yeah,
basement.
it's the 3 hour New Leaf. That's
Yeah.
Elaine May's 3 hour cut of New Leaf that's
Is
under her
there
bed.
one? There's a
Yeah,
3 hour new leaf?
allegedly there's and listeners write in if I'm wrong. But allegedly there's a 3 hour cut of a New
Oh
Leaf
my
that
God.
Elaine May says she has under her bed. But who knows?
Why can't
Who
we
knows?
see it?
Who knows if it'll be released? But
Oh, I'm
I,
there
I
for
I
that.
long for the day Criterion releases it. So
Yeah,
That would
that'd
be
be
really
amazing.
cool.
Jackie, how about
Yeah,
you?
I mean, this was my first time seeing this. I've seen Mon Oncle. I haven't seen Monsieur Hulot's Holiday. I really wanted to watch it on the plane coming home, but I fell asleep. Um, However, yeah, this is I love Mon Oncle, and so I was really excited to watch this. Delightful film, delightful watching experience, but not only that, it's interesting because I find this film almost difficult to watch. Like you don't think of like delightful films as difficult to watch, but there's so much happening in each frame. It's comedic, it's delightful, but it's not a casual watch. I don't feel like this is a casual movie at all. And I think that combination is really, really interesting. And I think that's exactly what he was going for, is he wanted to make a spectacle. He wanted to really wow people while also making them laugh. And I just think that we really don't get anything like that anymore. I mean, remotely, right? And so yeah, I had a great time with it, and I think it's an impressive, like the one of the most impressive pieces of filmmaking, just a masterclass in mise en scène and perspective. It's yeah, but the thing is, like, I was thinking about Mon Oncle, and like, did I feel a whole ton while watching this film? Not really. And I almost wanted a little bit more. I will say, I almost wanted a little bit more. I almost wanted one scene of like Barbara actually seeing Paris. Like I wanted like one little bit. I think Mon Oncle is the perfect amount of sentiment, right? And so if I had to say one thing about Playtime, one little thing that I was craving was maybe a little bit more, like just like like I don't know. But maybe Greg agrees with me because I feel like Greg, you also feel like this about certain things. So I'm curious to hear what you think. But I mean, obviously, delightful movie, incredible film. Greg.
Yeah. Um, so my feelings on this movie are a little bit complicated. So I first heard about Jacques Tati from in the early 2000s. I think it's still around, but there's a there's a Paul Thomas Anderson fan site called Red Vines and Cigarettes or something like that. And I used to go on there all the time, be like, "What's he doing next? What are the Paul Thomas Anderson updates?" And they had a tab on the website where it was like Paul recommends, and like basically whoever did the site just pulled any movie that Paul had mentioned in an interview and
Right.
put it there. So he had like the Jacques Tati movies. Pretty sure at least Monsieur Hulu's Holiday was on there. And so that was, I was like, oh, okay. And I think so it was just like on my radar. But in 2014, I had just moved to LA, and that's when Criterion did the Jacques Tati box set. And I worked, if you know LA, there's a Barnes and Noble at the Grove here, which is this big gaudy like outdoor shopping center. And I worked in the Grove, and it was November, so it was like the Criterion sale time, and I just started a new job there. And so every day after work, I would go to the Barnes and Noble and just kind of peruse. And I remember like a couple days in a row, I was like, "Oh, this Tati box set looks really cool," but I don't know any of these movies. I know Paul likes them. And so like it honestly, one of the joys in life is just like blind buying like a box set of someone's
Oh,
work
yeah.
and just like
Oh,
going through it because it's just like your own personal film school.
yes.
And so I just did it. And I remember hearing about Playtime because it's one of those movies. It's the title is synonymous with art house cinema. It's like Playtime, and the poster is really famous.
Right.
And I remember reading into it, like, what is this movie? And when I found out that, you know, it was this huge over budget movie where he built this whole like town square and everything, and like I became obsessed. I was like, I need to see this movie now. Like, this sounds incredible. So I got the box set, but I insisted on working up to Playtime first, like chronologically. So I did Jour de Fête, I did Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, I did Mon Oncle. And especially Holiday and Mon Oncle, like I loved so much. And Mon Oncle remains one of my favorite movies. Like I have a poster hanging in my apartment. I love Mon Oncle. So when I saw Mon Oncle and I loved it that much, I was like, oh my God, Playtime is next. Like, here we go. Strap in. I was like, if Mon Oncle is that good, but Playtime's the one that everyone talks about, like my mind is gonna be blown.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I remember the first time I saw it, I was disappointed just because I think touching on what Jackie said a little bit, like there's a sentimentality. There's this the whole thing in Mon Oncle is like he's from the old world of Paris, and then his sister, I think, and her family or his brother are from this like new modern world, and he straddles the two. And ultimately his relationship with his nephew in that movie. So there's like
Right.
just
But there is a relationship, right? There's
Yeah,
like one relationship.
there is a warm relationship that grounds the film emotionally.
Right.
yeah. And I think it was like the perfect amount for that movie. And
I
also
agree.
I love the Hulot character. Like he's so good.
Yeah.
I think he's often kind of like undersold as like the French chaplain or something. I'm like, no, he's much different. It's like that's such a generalization, I think, because the humor of Hulot is such a gentle one, and he's not. I feel like he's so rarely ever going for the belly laugh, which is what I appreciate him so much. It's
Right.
like
Definitely.
these subtle little like smirks almost like
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
throughout
it's
his
an
movies.
earnestness. I mean, it's an earnestness. It's very clear that like Mr. Bean took from this, where it's like he's not intentionally causing anything, and he's also not aware of it. But that's the joy of it, is that the world well, he doesn't exist in the world. The world exists for him.
Right.
So I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of Mr. Bean for sure. And then I even noticed like there's a lot of Python. And I know that Terry Jones was a big Tati fan, but there's a lot of, especially in the moment where he goes to the office building for the first time and he's like in a waiting room essentially, and then he gets put into a bigger waiting
Yeah.
room. And it's like all the CEOs like posters on the wall, like looking at him, and it's very Python. But so Terry Jones did on the Criterion disc, Terry Jones did an intro for this movie, and he loves it, but he calls it alienating. He's like, the movie is kind of alienating. He's like, that's part of like what the movie's about, but it also does that to its audience. And I was so confused when I first saw this because of the way that Hulot comes in and out. Like the
Right.
movie keeps losing Hulot.
Right.
And so the first time I saw it, and then especially when you get like 45 minutes of this restaurant opening, I was like, what is going on in this movie? Like I'm trying to track what's even going on. Now we're just like with this restaurant
You
opening.
know, I
So
felt that way when he's kind of waiting for his meeting leading into the trade show. That's when I felt that. I was like,
mm,
wait, what is this movie? Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the first time I saw it, very disappointed. I've seen it a couple times since, and I think each time I see it, I like it a little bit more. But I'm still not at the level where I love it, and I can't quite explain why. I think it just comes down to I need more Hilo, I guess, because
Yeah.
Hilo gives you that like through line. And while I in theory appreciate this movie that kind of like he kind of now he's in the background. Now you don't see him for like 30 minutes.
it's like, it's Where's Waldo? It's like one
Yeah.
page of Where's
Yeah,
Waldo.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
in fact, I recall someone said that. It's like it's a
Really?
Where's Waldo of just like just characters, right?
Right, right. And that's what makes that running gag so good, I think, that is like the doppelgangers, right? There's like four doppelgangers. There's the
Yeah,
guy at the trade show that
right.
he gets mistaken for, and then the German businessman is really nice to him. There's like two guys on the street that other businessman who he was going to interview with, like, thinks
Yeah.
is Hulo. It's
That's
not.
right.
And
Um,
and then there's the nuns that just keep showing up,
the nuns.
randomly and such.
There's
Yeah.
the first guy, the British guy, who's like, "I'm not Hulo," and that was hilarious too, because that's when the movie opens, and I remember I saw him in the background, and I'm like, "Oh, there he is!" Like the umbrella just fell,
Right.
and then he turns around and he's like, "I'm not Hulo," and then he comes off the bus. So I
Right.
appreciate that, like the fact that he wanted to step away from Hulo is present and also a joke in and of itself in the movie.
Yeah.
But also, like you said, Greg, it can alienate you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Well, and
It,
especially after he made two movies where
right.
in every single frame,
Right, right,
right?
right.
And so I can see where, especially if you're watching it in order, you're just like, what the heck is going on, right? But I can see also where audiences maybe weren't ready. And so maybe if he made actually like Traffic first and then
Right,
Playtime, like that would have
right, right.
sort of
If this was truly his last movie, right? Because he says like
exactly
it will
right.
always be my last movie, but technically it wasn't. But if we
Yeah,
had all that Hulo and then this, like that would be
right.
a nice like goodbye, you know?
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
I think too there's something about this movie. It plays often like the long game with setting up a joke. And I think sometimes it's so worth it. Like for example, the sign outside the nightclub, the arrow, how the guy
yes.
keeps like
The drunk people
yeah,
just keep
like
coming in.
that's great.
So
But
good.
then there's stuff like when he's at that convention and there's the silent door.
Yeah.
And like there's kind of this whole setup to it just for the guy to then get mad at Hulo for something he didn't do and slam the door to have it make no sound. But I just felt
Yes,
like there's almost like too much build up. It's like,
What about the door? How do you feel about the shattered door at the
oh, that's
club?
great. That's
Yeah.
great.
Oh
Where the
That's
yeah,
a
door
long one. That's
that
that's in it for the long haul too.
that's
That's
that's one of the best running gags in the movie. I think.
yes.
I
It's-
agree.
Yes.
it's
And I feel
hysterical.
like the repetitions are kind of what makes some of the stuff so funny. Like the fact that he sees two Arby friends. Like that's really funny.
Yeah.
Um
And you understand, yeah. I mean, you all hit the nail on the head. But like when you see that, you understand why it does alienate people, like we were saying, but also that comedy can be exhausting.
yeah.
And he teeters up to that point where it shouldn't work. Like it
Mhm.
shouldn't. A movie should not have this many jokes, or sight gags and slapstick and types of jokes too. Like not just running jokes, but
Right.
visual gags in the background, for instance,
Yeah.
or just like people walking through, and you're like, wait, so it's very dizzying and
Of
exhausting.
course. Mhm.
But so it's I understand it for sure why people find it very frustrating
Yeah.
and don't like it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but I think like the craft of it is so incredible because again, no one did that. I mean, the Marx Brothers did that, but with the dialogue. I mean, where it's
Mhm.
just a joke a minute, but no one ever
Mhm.
did that with the visual
Yeah.
on that scale And to say, like, I'm not going to do what the Marx Brothers did, which is
Hmm.
take a stage show and put it on film. I'm going to make a film. I'm making a movie. I'm making this epic, William Wyler size, Ten Commandments of comedy, right? Like I'm just gonna
Yeah.
do. And so I mean, that's why I defend it, where I go like, yeah, and he takes the big swing and he makes it happen. I mean, everything is big and exhausting, and it should be,
Hmm.
because that's kind of the point of that world, right? It's
Yeah.
dead, it's cold, and there's a lot of stimulation, and that's the world that, this film takes place in.
Yeah.
So.
I absolutely agree. And I think that's why I kind of said at the start, like, it's not an easy movie to watch. Like, if you look away for 1 second, you'll miss something. Even like and this is again, you mentioned like foreground, background. Like, that's something I noticed like immediately is just like, there is so much happening in both. And even like, I mean, yes, if you look away, you miss something. But even there was a shot I remember in the restaurant scene where the airplane is melting. Do you remember when there's
Yes.
no AC and that toy airplane is moving? It took
Right.
me 3 seconds to realize. I was like, okay, now we're staring at these two guys, but why? And then I turn a little bit to the left and I see that airplane melting,
Right,
which
right.
it took me a second.
And then as soon as
Uh,
they turn the AC on, it
it
comes
comes
back
back up, which is
to life.
Yeah.
hilarious. I absolutely love that. And also, yeah, like the trade show, right, where the salesman is trying to show the man the door, but then that other Hulo doppelganger is sitting at the desk, and I'm like,
Right.
wait, what am I looking at?
Yeah.
Which one am I supposed to be looking at? But yeah, the craftsmanship and just thinking about every single like part of the frame is just
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like one table is receiving dinner, right? And then in the background another couple is coming and it's saying like, this was our seat, like we had a reservation. And I'm like, wait, am I looking at the fish? Am I looking over there? What am I doing?
Yeah, well,
um
it's all done in wide. So it's like
yeah,
every time I see this movie, I always feel like I'm doing it a disservice by not seeing it in 70 millimeter on the big
that
screen.
would be
Sure.
really
Because
cool.
I just think this is one of those movies. Like, I mean, I think every movie is enhanced by seeing it on a big screen, but I think with this movie especially, those people annoying who are like, oh, you haven't seen it if you haven't seen it on the big screen. But I kind of think that's almost the case here, where it's like, I can't, yeah, you're right. There's so many things happening at once in these wide shots, and it's
Yeah.
like sometimes hard to make out what you're
Totally.
supposed to be looking at, or if you're
Sure.
supposed to, each time you watch it, look at something else.
Yeah, not to mention the apartment scene, like
Oh, yeah.
completely
Oh,
from the outside with all those apartment windows.
That's one of my favorite scenes, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so beautifully shot. But yeah, it should be. And that's what I mean too. Like he knew what he was doing. He knew
Yes.
he was making it for the big screen, and especially
Hmm.
on 70 millimeter. Like he knew he had to fill it all.
Hmm.
Uh, I just love that epic
Definitely.
auteurism.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about Megapolis. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, Coppola knows the canvas that he's painting on, so
Hmm.
he's not going to just keep everything right in direct eye
Right.
line. He's going to fill everything. I mean, no
Yeah.
matter how shoddy the CGI might be, right? Like, he still knows that a film needs to be epic and expansive. And so
Right.
for someone like Tati to say, okay, I'm going to do that, but make it a comedy,
Yeah.
pretty remarkable.
There
Yeah.
was also something I forgot to mention. So Jacques Tati originally, like when the movie was done, he wanted it to be this big spectacle. He wanted people to reserve their seats, like which was unheard of, right? In movies back then, but he wanted it to be like live theater. You had to reserve your seat, and it was
Right.
extremely exclusive, like seeing the movie when it just came out. That reminded me as well of Coppola and when Coppola was doing the kind of live actor, right, at some of the Megalopolis screenings,
Yeah.
where he had that live interview.
Well,
So
even going back to like Apocalypse Now, I think when it was shown theatrically originally, or maybe it was a special like roadshow version, like the title didn't appear on the screen because it was in the program they would give you, and all the
oh,
actors, I think they had like the credits were in the program.
interesting. That's really cool.
Great. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Jackson, you talked a little bit about like the theme and the cold world, and I think that what makes the comedy so special and what makes the movie so special is that it was built to reflect the theme, and every single sight gag that has to do with like perspective or steel or glass doors, like it's all about this theme of like modern, like mid-century modern and the
Yeah.
modern world and becoming kind of cold. So I think that that in and of itself is amazing, and all the tricks feed that, and the tricks feed the setting, and it's all just kind of working together, and it's so impressive. Like, I don't know, these glass doors, I mean, that's like the first thing you see, right? Are the nuns in the glass, right?
Well, the way
Right,
that the
right.
nuns
Their hat,
Yeah, with
their head,
the
yeah.
little bunny ears moving.
So
Yeah,
funny.
well, and it's great. Like when you do watch Tati in order, you see that he's like talking about the evolution of the world around him because
Hmm.
Monsieur was hot exists in a very specific old France, right? Like it's a very old sensibilities or traditional sensibilities. Mon Oncle is very bright technology invading in
Hmm.
on a almost what I love about many things I love about that movie is like the house feels like a real alien spaceship
Yeah.
like landed, and those scenes with the dogs, sort of create this geography that these innovations are beginning to invade in this old
Yeah.
world. And then you get Playtime where it's
It's
all
taken over. Like,
it
this is
has
it.
taken over. And then Traffic is more about how we are attempting to adapt to this new normal of craziness and literal traffic jams all the time. But I love Playtime because it's like it is so cold and
Hmm.
dark and all this stuff, and there is no life except the people in it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know.
It's
It feels very relevant in
yeah,
20
it's
where it's
pretty
just like,
much,
yeah.
yeah. It's pretty much the ugliest Paris I've ever seen,
It
really.
is. It is.
And it's funny though, because like
Yeah,
they're like, oh, that's the Alexander the Third Bridge, and it's like you can kind of see one of the
right,
pillars,
right.
and I love all the posters in the, I don't know if they're back at the airport, but it's like travel to London, and there's like this big skyscraper, and they had Mexico, and they had all
well, it's
these
like the same
places,
hotel.
same like
Yeah.
big skyscraper in every
Right.
poster, and it's so funny. So I love those jokes so much. And then of course there's like the moment when Barbara opens a glass door and you can kind of see the Eiffel Tower, you can see Sacré-Cœur, and it's
Well, and
like
that's in this movie. That's like the only
it's the
glimpses you
only,
get at
yeah.
old Paris
So
is
I
through
think
the
Right.
that's the
reflection.
thing. It's like I wanted one scene where she kind of breaks out and like actually sees Paris.
Yeah.
Maybe, but like that's just
But
me.
it
But
would be too
it would, yeah.
it would be too like hopeful.
He buys her the scarf, and the scarf is the thing, right? The
Yeah.
scarf has the landmarks on it, and it's really cute, and she's happy. Like,
Yeah.
she's like, but yeah, it's funny. But yeah, I mean, the sight gags are just, they're incredible. I think one of my favorites at the start, at least, was when he's that guy that he's supposed to interview with.
Mhm.
He seems like he's in the building across the way. Do you guys
Yeah.
remember? But
Yes.
actually, he's just bent down right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good. So
Yeah,
good.
so he goes across the street, just
Goes
totally
across it, and then they
realizes.
can't see each other, and they're far from
Right.
each other.
Right.
Yeah, that stuff is so great.
It's so good. And even like the perspectives that he makes, like the long walk that that guy first takes,
Oh,
right?
so good.
Yeah.
Just the fact that we're watching him walk that
Right,
far
right.
is like,
It's
that's
yeah,
the
he doesn't
joke.
cut away. He's just like, we're
Yeah.
gonna do that. And then only to again, it's the long build up to like the long
Yes.
walk to the joke punchline.
Yes.
Like
But that is the joke. And the
you're
sound of his
right, you're right.
shoes. It's
And
so
that's what's
funny.
great, and that's what's like brilliant about it too, is it never gets into surrealism,
Yeah.
because the whole time I remember I saw like Discreet Charm around the same time,
Uh-huh.
and I remember being like, oh, these are very similar, but then going like, oh, it's not, because
Yeah.
it's not it's not things coming into reality, it's the hilarity of reality.
Exactly.
But I think what sort of threw me off was like I mean, there's comedies, tragedy, bliss, timing, right? Like, but there's no stakes, like
No.
stakes is just existence, and
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
led to this like bigger thing where it's like, is Tati actually like deeply philosophical that we don't know about, like about how we exist in
Right.
modern world and how like stupid we are, like how
Totally.
hilarious we are. It's and yeah, I just remember, yeah, watching Buñuel and then this and being like, no, I think Tati is actually saying something about us as human beings. And
Yeah.
Christine and how hilarious we are as literally just bumbling
And
idiots.
also, yeah, our reliance on technology. And I mean, I'm thinking of the cubicle scene, right? Where he calls the guy and he's like, oh, I need this, comes to his own
Yeah,
cubicle, gets it, goes back to his cubicle with the phone. But like stuff like that happens. You're absolutely right. There's nothing surreal about this. Like
yeah.
people do
It's like that's
that.
how it is,
Yeah.
and it's a Tatiism, right? But like the recurring characters, and then like that's I don't know. It's just that's also the funny thing too, where we're like, oh, I just saw the guy who I beeped my horn at like an
Yeah.
hour ago. Like
Yeah.
he's in the bagel shop. Like it's very, it's like it's very Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm, right?
Definitely.
Like just the things that we don't think are going to intersect do intersect. It's great. I mean, it's
It's
fabulous.
very Seinfeld, actually.
Yeah. Well, Seinfeld's very Tati. I want to know if Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld watched these films. I'm sure they did. They must. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would love to know.
Is the hilarity of the mundane, like,
Yes. And just everything comes back in the end and it's a
right.
joke. Like,
Well, it's
But
this movie. Oh, sorry,
yeah,
go
no,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say how radical it is because, like, in that scene where the guy gets the file and goes back to his office and calls him, it all plays out in this ultra wide shot.
mhm.
It's not punctuated in any way. There's no music. In fact, most of this movie, except for the end and the beginning, all the music is like diegetic or
Mhm.
whatever. So it's all the source is like coming, and it's mostly just in the nightclub.
Mhm.
So a lot of the movie is musicless, and you're just hearing the sounds of the office or the sounds of an airport terminal or whatever. And I love that about it. But it's so bold because people expect their comedy to be punctuated, and he
Yeah.
never ever punctuates it.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
And punctuated with dialogue too.
Yeah.
Right. And the dialogue is so interesting. The mixing of the languages. And honestly, I will say though, I feel like the subtitles kind of distracted me because like they were speaking
Yeah.
so many different languages and like sometimes it was in English, but still there was subtitles and it was like I couldn't really hear. I didn't know if I was
Low in
supposed
the
to be
mix.
hearing.
It's like an
Yeah,
Altman
it is.
movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I could, I feel like I would watch it without subtitles altogether. Like I don't really think you even need it.
Yeah, it might have been Ebert. I'm trying to remember. It might have been Ebert who said like watch it as a silent film. Like it's
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right. The dialogue does distract. Also because we are just naturally craving plot.
Uh-huh.
Like
Exactly.
in this
Exactly.
film, like and so we're naturally craving like some plot development, but and we're like, oh my gosh, it's going on for quite some time where nothing happens. And
Right.
suddenly people are talking, and you're like, oh, okay, something's
I
happening.
know. I know.
So yeah,
Exactly.
it can be pretty distracting like that.
Well, I think
Yeah.
you just touched on, I think one of the reasons I respect it so much. Like I don't love it as a viewing experience, even though I should, but I so respect it as a movie because he does build this like microcosm and then he just lets it live. And that's the movie. It's like
Right.
Tativille, here's what's happening.
Yeah.
And I love that idea so much. But um I'm somewhere in the middle with the movie. And it's too I do really also love the fact that it is this epic comedy because there's so few of them. One of my all-time favorite movies is It's a Mad, 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 Mad World.
Yes.
Because Stanley Kramer treats it like you said, it gives it this William Wyler approach.
Right.
And I love that Playtime has so much more on its mind. Like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World is I don't want to say a stupid movie, but that's the movie that goes for the punctuated jokes and the
Yeah.
pratfalls and stuff. And Tati has something completely different on his mind here, and he has a lot on his mind.
Yeah.
And like I think that this is a very complex movie. The fact that I've now seen it at least 3 times, maybe 4, and I still can't quite get a good handle on it. You know, it's almost like the way I hear people talk about it sometimes, like, oh, it's a great time. Yeah, see Playtime. I'm like, yeah, but like it's a
It's a great time, but
it's a
it's
challenging work.
challenging.
Yeah.
It's very challenging work. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, let's not put that aside. Yeah, it is not an easy watch.
But that combination I think is so interesting and so rare. I mean, like, yeah, you could say that, but maybe you could say that about like The General, right? Like that's like a big spectacle and it's funny and I mean, it's not challenging.
No, that
though.
one's
Like,
so easy to watch.
it's easy to watch.
Yeah, it
It's
rolls
a
off
lot
the
of
screen.
like it's a lot of craftsmanship and a lot of work and choreography, but
This kind of feels like his Infinite Jest or something like that, where
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. Or it just, but also it doesn't do the movie thing, which we're so used to with Hollywood, where like it's a mad, 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 mad world where it falls on cliches
Mhm.
Hmm.
within the genre itself. Like he
Hmm.
is actively exploring the comedy genre. Like he is doing all different types of comedy, visual, slapstick, yeah, the recurring gags, like a one joke thing, and characters who have one characteristic about them that we know, and you just keep them from there. Very much things that in America, like Jerry Lewis was doing and stuff like that. But Jerry Lewis was very influenced by French comedies. So there's this whole like the French, farce aspect of it, but he's also really playing with a lot of comedic techniques, that most comedy, American comedies especially, would just sort of take one
Yeah.
and run with it, or hide it behind a cliche like a romantic comedy or a travel comedy, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of a world. Like it almost like they almost narrow themselves where he's just like, we're just gonna, have a giant, massive playground, for lack of a
Right.
phrase, right? But and just lets it roam free, which is pretty amazing because he's not constricted by a plot. He's not constricted by a romantic subplot. It's very daring and
Right.
audacious, like for that time. And the only other time I could really think about someone doing that is like Magnolia, but
Mm.
but even that is,
Plots.
yeah, and that's constricted to characters, right?
Right.
Like following the characters, but it's still, PTA has this
Hmm.
massive canvas of Los Angeles to play with. So it's,
Well,
Right.
yeah.
it's interesting you mentioned Magnolia because also when he made Magnolia afterwards, he said something like, "I'll never make a movie that's that great again." Like that's he basically said to
Yeah.
Tati like that was my final movie,
Yeah.
whatever. And then since then, people have asked him about that. He's like, I don't remember saying like just brush that under the thing. But it just goes to show you, yeah, Magnolia. I think he went in too, just like Jacques Tati here, of like I'm gonna do this work on this huge canvas, and I'm gonna put everything I have in me in this moment on this canvas. And
It's also just like important when we watch movies, like to recognize like when like artists really take the big swings, like we were saying, but also like risks. Like
Hmm.
it's a very risky movie. He built all the
Of
sets. He
course.
employed hundreds of extras. Like he was in the movie, he wrote it, directed, produced
Hmm.
it, financed it. Like it's very risky. And we were talking about, Megapolis, but like we might be talking about that in 10 years in a similar vein, where it's just
Hmm.
like how brave, for lack of a
Hmm.
better phrase, that this filmmaker did that. Pretty unbelievable, like pretty
Hmm.
remarkable that a single person not only had the ideas, but also had the courage
Yeah.
to do that, and then the courage to make, like we've been talking about, a movie that is very complicated and
Hmm.
very much in his vision of what a movie should be like and how the world should be, not falling into any, oh, I'm going to talk to the audience with what they're familiar with, or any cliches or conventions to bring it in. He's just like, hey, I'm going to put this out there. Come along for the ride or don't. It's up to you.
Yeah.
But I did it. I mean, like, kudos to him.
Right.
yeah,
Definitely.
no, absolutely. And I think yeah, there's something about because Tati did. I don't remember where I heard this, but he like kind of slept on people's couches and stuff for, like that's how his life ended because he really did, this movie did ruin him
Yeah.
financially and he never recovered. So there's something about that gives this movie even more weight where it's like I already really respect it, but
I
just knowing
agree.
that he sacrificed his quality of life for the rest of his life after he made this movie, like that's
Yeah.
such a huge
Never
commitment to your
regretted
art.
it too.
Yeah. Has anyone seen The Illusionist?
Yes, it's fabulous. Really,
Yeah.
Was
yeah,
that
really, really
before
good.
or after?
It just came out like 15 years ago,
Wait.
but it's the guy that did the Triplets of Belleville, the animated
Mm.
French film. So Tati had a script that he wrote and he never made it. And then like 15 years ago, Sylvain Chomet, I think is his name, he made it into a movie called The Illusionist, not to be confused with the
Yeah.
Edward Norton Illusionist. But yeah, it's a wordless animated film, beautifully animated with a Tati character
cool.
traveling through Europe with a young girl because he's a magician who's like, again, it's like the Tati themes of like he's a magician from the old world and no one really has any time for him now.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of traveling and trying to put on these magic shows at different clubs and stuff. And it's this kind of melancholic, journey by train, wordless, beautiful movie.
Nice.
Yeah. It has all the emotion and sentiment that you're missing from
That I'm
Playtime.
craving.
So I
Yeah,
think you
yeah,
really
exactly.
I don't need that much, you guys. I really don't. And I
No,
think
no,
that
no,
this
but
is an excellent movie.
It's a very touching movie. Yeah. The Illusionist. Yeah. It's a very, 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 very good film. Yeah.
This is random, but do you guys think that the New York Herald Tribune appearance is an homage to Breathless?
Hell
I
no.
think so. Yes.
No, I'm just kidding.
You think so?
I did.
I think so too.
I've always thought that too. And I was,
How many?
and
Yeah.
and I always wondered if Godard and him ever met, or did he ever meet Chaplin? Like, did he ever meet? I always, I wanna deep dive more into like what were his influences.
Right.
But yeah, yeah, oh for sure that was a breath.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
it
so
is.
too. I think
Yeah.
so too.
I think too, it's so interesting that Tati, he's one of he belongs to this group of people where I think he's a real genius. And I think if a gun was put to my head, like favorite French filmmaker, like he's probably my favorite. And it's a weird thing of too not loving Playtime. It almost feels like you don't love The Wall as like a Pink Floyd fan or something, where you're like, yeah, I love them, but this one work I'm kind of struggling with. But it's interesting that Tati like came up as a mime, right? And had this whole successful career as a mime. And then it's almost like filmmaking was this like secondary thing he had. And he's so good at it. I think he's like a genuine genius. Like people throw that term around like, oh, the genius director. And like there's a lot of really talented directors, but I think Tati was part of a elite few, like true genius, like truly understood everything from, I mean, it takes a lot to star in a movie and also direct it and also write, like he did everything. But yeah, the fact that filmmaking was not his like first love.
Right.
And in some circles, maybe too, like he's more remembered as a mime or like the stuff he did before he started making films or whatever. I don't know. It's just an interesting, I do wonder too, what circles he ran in. Like, did he run in circles, like you said, with Godard? Like, did they meet or was he kind of off on his own? Was he hanging with other mimes? Like, I don't know.
Other mimes.
Yeah. Or did did Truffaut and him ever chat?
Yeah.
Did he ever meet, the expats and like Gertrude Stein and those folks like early in the 1920s and such? I always just wonder, and also wonder what they thought of it, or even what American filmmakers, even the, George Stevens and all those guys like who made the early comedies, screwball comedies, Howard Hawks, like what did they think of Tati? What did Jerry Lewis think of Tati? I'm sure he must have seen Mon Oncle. Like that's I always love that. Just like what did these people think of especially someone like him who was so important immediately as a figure in film, in French cinema, but made so few movies, like just made so few. So it must have been special when he came out with something.
Right.
So yeah, I wonder like who flocked to it to see it because they were a fan. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Terry Jones on the disc, on the Criterion disc, talks about like him and his wife being in Paris when this came out and being like, oh, the new Tati, and being really excited, and how their theater had like a 70 millimeter like preview before the movie, like 70 millimeter. And they were like, why are they doing this? Like Playtime's not going to be in 70. And then it started and it was, and how
cool.
impressed he was. And
that's amazing.
But yeah, talk about influences too. I mean, I think it's obviously Terry Jones is a big fan, but I think the influence on Python and Terry Gilliam, I think something like Brazil is like an absolute direct descendant of Mon Oncle and Playtime. I mean, it's like if those don't exist, Brazil doesn't exist.
And even something like Fisher King, I was thinking of when I was rewatching it, because it's a very specific alternate urban reality, right? Like it's a very distinct heightened urban landscape that is to make a statement. And Fisher King is like that too. Like he really blows up the underworld of the city to make a statement. So, but yeah, Brazil for sure. My gosh, I mean, even all the practical sets
Yeah.
probably were Tati inspired.
Yeah. There's just something about, I don't know what, someone fit, messing around with fidgety, like electronic stuff and mechanical
Yeah.
stuff and it going wrong. Like that's just always, I've always had a soft spot for that.
It's fun. I know, like fake, like what do they call those? Like circuit boards? I don't know. Like what?
Oh yeah, there's like
The walls with buttons, switchboards.
Yeah, switchboards. Yeah.
honestly, that's one of my favorite moments in Playtime is when he first arrives at that office and the older guy
Trying to figure out how to
and he
solve.
pushes one button and it lights up this whole trail and then it
Yeah.
stops and
Yeah.
none of them are
You do
labeled.
the restaurant too when the AC goes out, right?
Oh,
Right.
Oh,
best. Yeah.
the restaurant, yeah. All the first of all, the restaurant sequence is like an hour,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize until it was done. I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, this is the last thing of the movie. Like this
Yeah,
is gonna be it. It's almost an hour.
It's almost it's pretty close to it. Yeah, yeah,
It's so
again,
funny.
Again, the craft of that, like how do you just sustain something for
know.
that long is unbelievable. Yeah. I also love any movie or any comedy where there's bumbling crowds coming, like people just coming out of scenes
Yeah.
and views. And
It's
so
so
like
fun.
the movie is it, where it's
Yeah.
just like just you see people, the recurring characters come in not knowing what's going on and then getting caught up in the chaos.
Yeah.
It's so good. Just
Yeah.
like in Monsieur Hulo's with the train, the crowd and the train things. It's just so great. And
Yeah.
again, small things that we don't notice in our everyday lives, but then, if we step back for a minute, we're like, oh my God, we all look so stupid. Going to the wrong terminal, airport, right? And we're
Yeah.
all, so-
I think too, it's to touch on the restaurant scene. I think that's the time in the movie because leading up to that, it's kind of this series of just sketches, almost loose sketches set in this world.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
when you get to the second half of the movie and it's the opening of this nightclub, it's like for the first time the movie has this like narrative drive and it kind of
Yeah.
stays somewhere long
Yeah.
enough to where you
Right.
can get a full sense of the geography of it and
Yes.
all the
Right.
characters involved with that sequence. It's
Yeah.
really it's really like quite a
impressive.
feat.
Yeah, I love like he's about to get kicked out, right? And then it's that German guy who feels bad that he yelled at him, and he's like, "Oh no, you're gonna stay."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
The fish where they keep like
oh my god,
lighting
keep
the fish
peppering.
and
Yeah,
putting the sauce on top.
it's so funny. I love when the AC turns on, and then that woman, like, there's a woman, right? And like it looks like her skin starts like flapping because the AC is blowing.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
great.
It's so funny.
The marks
But
from
again,
the chairs.
the scale of comedy, like every single thing thought about, like
Yeah,
from
the marks.
that, yeah, it's
The marks on the chairs are hilarious.
oh, it's
to
so
me.
good. But again, head spinning, like you don't see that until your third time, and you're like,
Right.
oh my God, like
There's the one woman on the dance floor that points out the guy's jacket, and then she turns around and she also has
Yeah, that's
it.
it has
right.
gone. Yeah,
It's
brilliant.
so funny.
I mean, I think the closest I've seen in recent years has been like Wes Anderson. Like it's
Yeah.
just, but it's funny because it's like it's very clear that Wes Anderson is very influenced by
Of
Tati.
course.
Like
Yeah.
I think we can go on record and say that. I mean, it's but everyone goes like, oh, every frame of a Wes Anderson film, you can see so much detail and stuff. I'm like,
Right.
well, yeah, I mean, you can do that in Tati too,
Yeah, definitely.
It's nothing new. But
For sure.
but I'm glad that like he can like Anderson can take that and then put, a very distinct aesthetic on it, which I think Tati's films have a look in terms of composition, but in terms of like the aesthetic, it's nothing really unique. I think like, there's no color palette, there's no this, like it's all just the composition of the shot sort of makes
Right. Well, except the gray in this one, the gray color palette in this one is very impressive. Even the flower lady, like I like how the flower lady's all in gray, but her flowers obviously have color.
But again, great attention to detail. Like let's just have her in all.
Yeah.
It's so good. And even just the restaurant scene too, because it's just one thing after the other. From the waiter who keeps getting like stuff on him, so he's like in the back
switching
and
with the
they're
other guy.
switching articles of clothing one at a time. And then there's like the pass through in the kitchen where like the dish won't fit unless you turn it a certain way.
Yeah.
And then, as speaking too of like Paul Thomas Anderson, I can imagine the way that the restaurant scene, especially with like the jazz group playing, it builds to this, it slowly builds. It's more hectic, more hectic, more hectic. Then the ceiling starts coming in.
Right.
Kind of felt like what he did a little bit in Punch Drunk Love in terms of especially John Bryan's score there, where it's
Yeah.
this like very
Yeah.
percussive thing as
It
things
is.
are
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
slowly
Totally.
spiraling into more and more chaos.
Right.
Yeah. But also what's great about what I love about how these are shot is that like the camera's pretty static most of the
Yeah.
film. So it's again to add to this cold, detached, removed sort of feeling. But yeah, and whereas I just thought Punch Drunk Love, like it's all about the mobility of the camera, right? And then Tati is just it's a very static, direct. Everything's on the horizon, eye line.
Right.
Yeah, it's great. It's such a good juxtaposition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also love that they use the shattered glass from the door as the ice in the champagne.
That shattered glass,
funny.
that probably might be my favorite gag in the whole.
Yeah.
The door
Yeah,
and the
it's so
doorman.
good.
Just the commitment, like that.
I know.
There's no self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
That he has to like the rules of that bit are so great. It's like he needs to keep opening the door, and he's like, "This is crazy," but right this
and
way.
it goes anyway, and then he even uses it as like a tip jar.
Oh yeah,
He uses the doorknob.
It's just yeah, like setting up the rules and then breaking them. It's brilliant. Yeah,
It's so fun.
I feel like even going back to Seinfeld, I feel like Michael Richards must have gotten some influence. It's in the way that Hilo knows how to take a great fall. Especially when he hits up against that glass.
Yeah.
Or there's that scene where he's just standing and in the guy's apartment and just falls on his ass.
Yeah.
And honestly, my favorite Hilo moment in this movie is when he is at the booth for the door that doesn't make any noise, and the guy has been yelling at him, and then realizes he got the wrong guy, and he starts apologizing, but Hilo's expression like barely changes, and he's just kind of like, it's just like this beautifully played moment by him. I just think that he's so good at those just like subtle nuances of that character.
Yeah, it's great.
So fun. Should we do Sight and Sound?
Yeah, let's do it. Jackson, do you have a favorite sight from Playtime?
I think the sight is the door gag. I think, or the shattered glass door gag. I mean, just anytime it cuts to that, because it's something different every time it comes to that. That's again what's great about like they establish the rule, and then it's 4 different variations on it, and it's all different. I love that. I do love the office scene. Just that shot. I mean, it's the iconic shot from the film where he's just standing above and seeing it. It's just
all the cubicles.
Because it encapsulates like obviously the juxtaposition between Hulo and the world, but also the scope of the film. Like the scope of the film was literally one man against this entire world and the grace or the grayscale. Everything. It's I could get that framed and put it up, and again you can just analyze it all day. Yeah.
Nice, great picks.
Great. Mine's a combined actually, and it is the scene where Barbara opens the door. It's the shot where Barbara opens the door, and you kind of see the Eiffel Tower because the music kind of plays a little bit over there. It gets really sweet and very, very wistful, and just like. I don't know. I just like, to me, that's kind of the movie. And I love that scene. And I know that when I think about this movie, I'll probably think about that shot. Come on. And also, like, I've had weird dreams where, like, I'm going to Paris or I'm going to a city I really want to go to, and it looks nothing like what I thought it would. And like, or like when you're driving, right? Usually when you end up at the airport and then you're driving to the city, and while you're driving, I've noticed this a lot of places I've been, you're like, wait, like the actual city's not going to look like this, right? And so I don't know, that her plight, I guess I identify with a lot. And so I love that shot a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think even the Jackson, you said like the movie avoids surrealism, which it definitely does. There is still this like dreamlike, almost like, yeah, the anxiety you get in a dream is like this movie.
Yeah, and like the whole time I was searching, like, okay, but they're gonna see Paris. They're gonna see Paris, right? They're gonna, and then it didn't happen, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it works. But it works.
It
I mean,
works. It works. It
again,
definitely works.
it's supposed to exist in its own world,
Totally,
and reality,
totally,
and time, and they pull it off.
definitely. Yeah, Greg.
Yeah. So I guess we all have right around the same area. My favorite sight and sound is just it's the arrow to the nightclub, and then when that first drunk comes out, they've like thrown him out, and he just looks up and
He
spins
goes
around and goes right back in, and even to like the electricity of the sign like going on in chunks, like it's just so good.
Wait, should we listen?
Yeah, let's hear it. Yeah, but it's just a great
That's a
moment.
great moment. Yeah, so many great moments.
Jackson, do you have a favorite sound, or is it tied to your site?
I would say it's tied to the site because the sound design in that whole restaurant scene is pretty incredible. Yeah,
Also, I didn't know this. Sorry to cut you off, but did you guys notice that when the fake door is being opened, the music from the restaurant gets louder
yes,
and then
yes,
gets
yes. That is so brilliant. And again, just the sound design of it is it's just so good. Even when it's broken and he's
when he opens it, the music gets louder, and then as he shuts the fake door, it gets more quiet.
So great. It's so great.
So good.
Yeah, but yeah, I would say the whole sound design of that sequence is again needs to be studied. I mean, truly, just how brilliant it is,
right,
and how meticulous. Like you can tell that Tati was such a perfectionist, because of how well curated, the volume and the in and out of all the sound design in the film is. It's great. Yeah.
So
I can't help it. Maybe it was stressful, but I can't help but imagine that this movie was super fun to be not Tati on, because I'm sure he had the entire financial weight of it riding on his shoulders and everything. But to just be sort of like a background actor on this set for weeks or months or years or whatever, or just probably was fun. Maybe it was super stressful. I don't know, but it seems like it would have been fun.
I never heard either way. Like I read he was a real perfectionist and of course was like desperate to finish the film, but never heard any accounts that he was, a jerk or even that he was like, oh, it's gonna be great, a delusional, kind of person.
Right.
So, yeah, but it feels like just to exist in Tativille for for that time would be exciting. Like just to walk around those sets would be really, really cool.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Well, we have a segment where we read Pauline Kael's review of the movie, but I could not find a review for this. I don't know that she reviewed it, but I do know, I think it was Richard Brody or someone mentioned that Pauline Kael was not a fan of the movie.
Really?
But I could not find a review anywhere. So I don't know if she just didn't.
Did she review any other Tati movies?
That's a good question. Probably.
She might have written an expose about French cinema and put Tati in there. Yeah.
But this that someone said there was like she was not a fan of Playtime.
Wow. I believe Ebert was a fan of this. I believe
Ebert was a big fan.
Yeah.
I think most critics, especially it's like he said, like when it came out it was kind of lukewarm, and over the years it's just grown more and more.
This is your defect? Is that
That's his first
That's
film.
his first film? It seems like she goes, it's not silent. It has sound effects and music, but it's not in French either. Tati has devised a kind of unintelligible yet expressive gibberish. It's like the talk of robots who've got fouled up. I mean, before that, she kind of just gives a synopsis of the movie. It's just a synopsis.
Oh, okay.
As a comedian, buoyancy and impersonal eccentricity in the face of disaster are his special style. Yeah, it doesn't really say much.
Okay.
Interesting.
Jacques Tati has a spare, quick, improvisatory touch.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think Maybe liked him.
I will say, just for the record, one of my favorite sound elements in not in any comedy, but definitely in a Tati film, is in Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, where he's listening to the jazz song, and it just immediately cuts in, and it's so loud because
Yeah.
it's like quiet, this like the entire film, and all of a sudden there's just loud jazz music, and he's just sitting in the chair smoking his pipe. It's just great. Yeah.
Yeah, so good.
It's also good.
Yeah, God. Well, should we do Letterboxd?
Yeah.
I'm gonna do the 1-star reviews.
There you go.
Those are fun.
Here you go.
And it's good for a movie that's so objectively good. You know what I mean? Like this movie is like
Yeah.
you can't deny this movie's like craft really. And
Right.
like to write a 1-star review is like crazy.
Here's one. The Cure for Insomnia. That's the entire review. Just observing people walking around and being lost is a tedious thing to watch for 2 hours. I don't get it. Was the purpose of this to say something about technology or that we cannot communicate very well thanks to so many different languages in the world? Also, I think was supposed to be a comedy, but I can honestly say I did not laugh once. Visually impressive, but that's it.
Similarly, I have a 2-star review here that says, I genuinely feel awful giving this film this rating. Look, it looks great, and you can tell a lot of care was put into this. I completely and wholeheartedly understand the love this film gets, and it deserves it. But man, this film just did not connect with me. I personally found it boring, a bit tedious, and unfunny. Now, would I tell you not to watch this film? No. I just think this wasn't for me. Maybe a rewatch, I'll understand why it's great. But for now, I just don't get it.
Interesting. I have a 3-star. It says, as a visual spectacle or a piece of cinematic high art, there is no doubt this film deserves its esteemed place in history. But as a movie, in my opinion, it lacks a certain je ne sais quoi. Actually, je sais quoi. It ain't got no plot.
Oh, Jesus. Come on.
And then, okay, here's a 5-star to make us happy. Gotta get drinks with Tati and pick at that silly little brain of his.
If only. If only.
That'd be fun.
That would be fun. Yes, it would be great.
Someone just said that was a visually crisp, incredibly detailed, mildly amusing 2 hours.
I will say, like, as much as I love it, it is hard to recommend. So I always recommend people watch Mon Oncle first.
Yeah.
And I say if you did very well with that, watch Monsieur Hulot's Holiday. And if you're even more curious, because
Go to Playtime.
Tati is a bit of an acquired taste for contemporary audiences. I think there's, again, like, it's not as fast as Marx Brothers or Three Stooges, but yeah, if somebody says, "Oh, I really like Monsieur Hulot's," I was like, "Okay, try Playtime now."
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Usually, it's the folks who are, who are into the Criterion Collection, who know, how, each different directors' films evolve and things like that. That it's okay to recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely a work up to kind of movie.
But yeah, I think it's delightful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Deserves its place on the list.
Oh, wait, you guys, I didn't even mention what number it is on the list.
What number is it?
Oh my God. It's number 42 on the 2012 list, which is the list that we're currently finishing up. It has jumped up to number 23 on 2022.
Wow, so it's growing in esteem.
Wow.
So it was 42, now it's 23.
Okay.
I think
How do we think?
I think it touches into what Jackson was saying. Like, I think as time goes on, a movie like this is so rare. Like, this movie approached in this way and given this level of like grandeur, like, I think it'll only grow in appreciation.
Probably. Yeah.
And I think too, because it's kind of enigmatic. Like, I've seen it a few times and I'm still trying to like get a really good feel for it. So I think it's a movie that, yeah, it's like you said, it's like delightful, but it's dense.
Definitely.
And it's like, yeah, the two.
Definitely.
A rewarding.
How do we feel?
Oh yeah.
I was just gonna say, how do we feel about 23? The number being 23 currently on the list.
I think so, because I think Sight and Sound does a really good job with, again, like, it doesn't, I'm not saying it doesn't matter if it's not entertaining, but like, plot and character is just one aspect of what makes
Right, a Sight and
these
Sound
films,
movie.
a Sight and Sound film. So I think in that regard, I think because of all the things we talked about with how epic and the craft of filmmaking that this shows, and sort of the innovations of it, like in terms of the comedic genre, in terms of what film is able to do, what Tati was able to do in the 60s on this scale. I think that's absolutely very deserving.
Yeah.
I think if Mad World was 23, I'd be pissed, but that's just me. Sorry, but
you're gonna take that, Greg?
Yeah, I don't think it should be 23. Well, this has been super fun. Thanks so much for joining us, Jackson. We've enjoyed I think too, just
Thank
to have
you, Jackson.
Yeah, and it's been great hearing about your journey with Playtime and how much it means to you. And
thanks for helping us kind of just like come back into this Sight and Sound world, because I mean, we did our Christmas special last time, but now we're officially back on these Sight and Sound movies. Woo! So thank you, Jackson, for giving such amazing input.
Oh, thank you guys. This was great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Well, I think that just about does it.
Yeah, we'll be back next week for M. Fritz Lang's M is next on the Sight and Sound list.
That's going to be fun.
So, yeah, join us then. Until then, I'm Greg.
I'm Jackie.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Special thanks to the patrons at our highest tier, John Pennington and Cynthia Fordwell. Seen and Heard is an official podcast of the Arroyo Film Club. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line, you can find us on email at hello@seenandheardpod.com or on Instagram @seenandheardpod.